Christian Worldview, and they are Christians leading a fancy business. And really, it's great to learn from them about leadership, about how they do it, how they treat their staff and customers, and so on. And so we have a privilege to have one of the CEO, or I'm right?
No.
Or one
of the leadership team.
One of the leadership team.
Important that we, as Christians, establish ourselves as not just followers in the business world, but actually as leaders in the business world. And this really grew. This belief grew over the time that I worked at iSolutions. It was 25 people when I started working. Now it's about 230 people. It's not only because of me, by far not. In the first couple of years I was more consuming, but now I am working here as the head of one of our, or as the head of delivery of one of our 4 business units. I lead about 25 people in Zurich, Barcelona, in Basel, and also here in Bern. And yeah, that's what I do currently. I did many roles previously, but I'm not going to take you through all the CV. Over the years, I also I fell in love, basically. I fell in love before I went to New York, but the girl I loved then was not interested in me, and so I had to accept that, which was hard. But and then I also had to leave her, get her out of my mind, basically, because I realized it took me too much time to think about an unfulfilled love is something that's very consuming for your brain. So God really challenged me to let that go, and I decided to do it. And 2 or 3 years later, that same girl came back to me and said, "Okay, I really have to tell you something. I'm interested in getting to know you better." And at first I thought this is from the devil. I didn't want it. I said no. I made my decision. I'm standing firm with that. But over time we got to know each other, and today I'm married. I have 2 children, and they are 3 and 1 years of age. And my wife is really much into family, and so what we have developed as our vision together is that we want to make an impact in the realm of business, faith in God, and family. And these are 3 things. Usually they work against each other. Usually you spend too much time pursuing a career. So I know so many stories of people spending time pursuing their careers and totally losing their marriage, just giving it up for the sake of the career. And I have never met somebody who was happy about that fact.
You said faith, family, and third one?
Faith, family, and business.
Business, thank you.
And also with faith and business, I hear many times people saying, I cannot work for this company because I cannot stand behind the values of that company. That might be possible, but if nobody stands up and does something about it, it's never going to change. So it's also 2 things that usually people that can work against each other. But I believe that if we bring a balance into those 3 areas, as Christians, we can make a huge impact. We can be role models for society. And that's what we work for as a family. So that's who I am. Very not so brief summary. And now I'd love to get to know you. So maybe teaching or talking to our staff actually also about is we believe that empowered people, they lead to happy customers. And that leads to new customers. And this will ultimately result in growth. And one of the mistakes we did at the beginning is focus too much on this, which is never going to work. But if you start here, if you focus on your employees, those will be the ones that take care of your customers. And if your customers tell to potential new customers that it's great to work with these people, this will automatically lead to new customers. And if you have happy customers and new customers, then you don't have to go to HSG to understand that you will grow as a company. Other last year, one would be leadership, which I know is important to a lot of you. So let's discuss a little bit about that. I would also be interested in what you learned. And second, maybe finance. If we still have time, we can also tackle that. Okay, so leadership. This has been a journey for me. I've been in many. This last year, I've been in many leadership trainings. So first of all, we did leadership training here at iSolutions. So we had an external coach that we brought together with our core leadership team in order to train ourselves into becoming better leaders and better, working better together. And then we also did small groups there where we learned together, we studied books together. And then I also went to school, which is a school that is really built for people with leadership experience. So you can only start the school when you're like, when you have a couple of years of leadership experience. And so all of our class is also leader experienced, and we get to learn a lot about that leadership as well. And I was really, something really struck me when I learned, when I visited these schools or these trainings. And the thing that really surprised me when reflecting on it is all of the leadership courses I ever did in my life, they started with myself. So the first module we did in that training was actually, he was the guy who did the training was a professional ice hockey player in his previous life, and now he's doing business trainings. The first module that we did with him was about self-management. And what do you do to manage your life much better than you used to do? And then I did the same thing at our school at the university. Also, first thing about self-management. And then I reflected on it. I was like, I've learned so much about self-management in this past 30 years. I feel like I've learned it all. But I haven't, because I still make many mistakes. And it really struck me the fact that leadership, it really starts with you. If you're not able to control yourself, to manage yourself, to establish ways how you go about your priorities, how you plan from what you want to achieve in life to what you want to achieve in a 5-year span, in a 1-year span, and then break it down to what you have to do today in order to work towards that, then it's going to be very hard for you to become a leader. And I've been working with leaders for a long time now. It's about, I think, 5 years ago when I had the privilege of working with all of the leadership boards of SBB. So all the way from the very top to then one level below, they have about 10 leadership boards of SBB, so the railway company here in Switzerland. And back in the day, they were so organized that I laughed a little bit about it. Because they know exactly when, at what time in the day they're going to do what. So they have a personal assistant, which I think is not necessary, but they have a personal assistant that for them makes blocker in their calendar and tells them, there you have to answer this email, you have to take care of this task, you have to take care of this task. 2 weeks ago, I met the CEO in our university, the CEO of Volkswagen Group, right? The Porsche, Volkswagen, Lamborghini, all of these brands. He's the CEO of the group. He is so organized that he knows exactly the hours when he's gonna have spare time in November. That's the level of organization that goes into running a company like the Volkswagen Group. And this really inspired me that if we want to be great leaders, we have to become very, very good in managing ourselves and managing our time. So there's hundreds of methods, and I don't want to go into depth. If you want, we can talk at the end on some of the methods that work for me. But everybody's different. But you have to take the time to manage yourself. And now I'm going to take this a level deeper, because that for me is really the most important thing about leadership, and the thing we as Christians should be the number one influencers into pursuing that. Because how many of you know when you will have spare time in November? I don't. Why don't you know? Because you want to be, I'm just going to say for myself, I want to be free. I think it's too complicated to manage a life like that. I think it, and if I'm very honest, I don't think I'm important enough that I need to manage my time as accurately as the CEO does. But you know what? You're getting it all wrong. Because as Christians, we are royalty. We are members of the family of the King of Kings. We are representatives of the kingdom everybody in this world wants to be part of without knowing. And this really became so important to me in the way I think about myself. If I want to be a leader, I need, and I know you heard this 100 times, but I'm gonna reiterate on it because I was so surprised by the things that we learned in this school. If you want to be a leader, it starts with you, and it starts with the understanding that you have of who you are. If you stand in front of a group and have to lead them, we should not be scared of that as Christians. Not at all. It should be so normal to us. If people want to listen to what we have to say, we should not be scared of that. That should be more than normal to us. Doesn't matter if you're from Switzerland or whatever country you're from, you are a member of the royal family, and you're representing that wherever you are. And I'm going to suggest to you that we do a very poor job, especially in business as Christians, in being representatives of the King, and we spend way too much time in thinking about our self-doubt, about what we can do, about are we in the right position, is there a conflict of interest in what we do. We should not think about these problems. We should not think about that. We need to reflect on, we are the ones that are shaping the world around us. It's not the world around us that is shaping us. Members of the royal family, I watched the Netflix series Crown, which I don't recommend doing, it takes way too much time. But one thing you get is that if you are a member of the royal family, you have people are gonna like you for who you are. Not for what you do, for who you are. And we have to become, as leaders, this is so much in my heart, we have to lead out of who we are, but not out of who we are in ourselves, but out of who we are in God. And this will make all the difference. And the tools, you have all the tools you need. If you need to sit down, if I need to sit down with an employee, I can ask God what he thinks about that employee. And I'm going to say in the employee development test, I'm going to say the thoughts. I'm not going to say, I prayed for you and then I heard and I had a crazy image of you. But I'm going to say very straight to the point, I see you're very good at that. And if you do that and pursue that, you're going to change the world with that. What can we do now in this next year to develop that skill? People almost, they get tears. Not because they're touched by me, but because God has shown me something that is relevant for their lives. That's the way we can bring Holy Spirit into the work environment. And it always starts with us and how we think about ourselves. So important. Every management course is going to tell you, manage yourself. And I'm telling you, manage yourself because you matter. Because you matter so much. God is going to tell us he cares so much about you. I was in last year I had a situation where we had a company that we were working for. We did concept work for them. So we wrote the paper, 100 pages, telling them how they can move from an old IT infrastructure to a brand new one that will enable them to work together much better as a company. And at the end of the day, we sent out the proposal, and then they got back to us and said, we're not happy with the proposal. Then they left for vacation, and I spent two weeks. We spent eternally talking about what the problem might be. It stressed me so much that I couldn't spend the time with I couldn't enjoy the time with my family anymore at the weekend, because I didn't realize, but in the back of my head I was constantly thinking about what went wrong, why is this happening, what's the situation. Finally, after 2 weeks, on Friday, I think on Thursday, I took the time and I wrote down in my journal a question to God. Why is it that this customer is not happy? Then God said, then I read, or no, I heard from somebody who read the book. I didn't even read it myself. The book is about how you can do dialogues with God in your journal. Maybe you know about that method. It worked for me pretty well. So I wrote down that question. Why is that customer not happy? God is asking me, why do you want this customer to be happy? That's a stupid question. But then I reflected on it. I was like, okay, I don't know. And then I wrote down in my journal the question. I could show you the print screen of this. Why are you even working for that customer? It was a bank. I'm going to talk about financials if we still have a couple of minutes, but I can tell you already, I think banks are part of our problems that we have with finances. So this question came by surprise. I was like, oh yeah, I don't know. I don't really want to work for a bank, to be honest. And then God said, okay, then I asked back a question, do you want us to work for this bank? And he said, maybe. What do you, and then we went into a dialogue in where God really asked my motives, like asked behind my motives. Why are you actually wanting to work for that bank? And in the process, I realized that I had the wrong motives, and I had to adjust my motives. There's things that this particular bank does that are very much in line with the values that I have. But I could only see, and this was in the back of my head, I never really talked about or reflected about that, but I could only see the things that they were representing in front. They were a bank, they may be harming our society. That was my thinking. You don't have to have that opinion. That was my opinion. But I never saw what this bank was standing for. So God fixed that problem first. And then at the end of the conversation, I wrote down the question again, what is it that we have to do in order to make this project a success? And he said, you have to do this, this, and this, 3 or 4 things, which then I was not courageous enough to talk about those things. And then, so the next week on Monday, we have a call with our customer, and we have an internal opinion that we formed about what the problem was. And it was not matching the 4 points I had in my journal written down, because I wasn't courageous enough to say, you know, you're all wrong, it's those 4 issues. But then the customer in the call said, your problem is this, this, and this, and this. And it was exactly the 4 points I had listed in my journal. And I'm telling you this because I want to tell you, God cares so much about the details of what we do. And he knows everything. It's such an unfair advantage. I think I talked about the last kid. It's such an unfair advantage. Nobody not working together with God could possibly understand what other people are thinking. But God knows. And he will tell you if you have the right heart. And he didn't have to tell me. He knew I wouldn't be courageous enough to go about it. But he cared about my heart. He cared about what I do and why I do it. That's why it's so important for us to understand why we're doing something. And when it comes to leadership, we are leaders because it's our nature. It's our nature as children of God to make an impact where we are. That goes way beyond ourselves. Goes way beyond our families. Goes way beyond our companies. Way beyond our countries. That's what we're called for. But it starts with yourself and with you believing that you are the one that's going to make a difference. That's my leadership nugget of the day.
Oh, very good.
Yes.
Thinking about how can I make it that I trust myself more? How can I do it? We ask this question all the time. I would suggest just do it. I mean, honestly, just do it. You have everything is already there. It's a question about convincing yourself about it. And for me, it was a question about other people telling me what you are doing is just, it's not enough. It's not enough to just stay in your small little room and say, oh, I made small progress, it's all that nice, but I'm still fighting with this. Yeah, we're all fighting with everything. No, none of us is perfect, and we're not going to be until the day we die. But it's important that we do something and believe in ourselves with what we have. And people in the world are showing us, actually. If you look at social media, this is exactly what is happening there. It's people who realize it doesn't matter if I make mistakes, but I'm going to make a picture of myself that shows me perfect. And why do we as Christians struggle so much and think about oh, I lack in this, oh, I don't read my Bible every day. I don't read my Bible every day all the time. Yeah, it's bad. I would love to do it better, but it's not going to keep me from making an impact wherever I go, because I'm a child of God if I read my Bible or not. Jacob never read his Bible. He never had one.
And when we were having this round, one of the thing or you hang, it was saying if you are hitting your goal, that means you're not setting them high, for something.
Yeah, exactly.
And I wanted to click picture of that, because that is we need a goal. It is so important, it's impactful, and
maybe just, and then one thing I want to say, because I struggle with that a lot as well. That's the feedback I always get from my bosses, is become more courageous. And if you read about in the Bible, actually, that's the feedback that God gave to his leaders. Joshua 1:9 is one of the most read or most much noticed. Be courageous.
Yes. Have I not commanded you? Be courageous.
And it's a command. It's not a think about it, and then when you feel about it, do it. No, go out and do it. For me, one thing I do, for example, one thing I learned to do in business context, just to give you also some, like maybe a tip or something. One thing I learned to do is when I go into meetings, I used to 10 years of my professional life, I would go into meetings with big customers. I told you I was working with the management board of SPB and all of that. I would go into those meetings and I would be scared. Am I well prepared enough? What are they going to think of me? Is my suit expensive enough for these people? That's all the questions everybody asks themselves. And one morning God challenged me and said, Lucas, are you not understanding that what they are getting with you is what they are all looking for without knowing? And I remind myself of that phrase every time I go into a meeting. I'm not going to be scared of this situation, because me being in that call is something that these people are looking for. It's not because of me, it's because of God. They can see him in my eyes, and they react to that, and they love it. Sometimes I do a better job in showing it, and sometimes I do not a good job in showing it. And then we get problems. Because I myself, I would have no chance of doing the job I'm doing, I'm telling you. I was a very bad kid at school. My grades were very bad. There was nothing telling my teachers that I would one time go to university and pursue the education I can pursue now. Nothing at all. I would live no day without God in my job. But it doesn't matter. I have him. He's not going to leave me. Yeah.
So you will say something about finance and identity, because last time it was so impactful for me.
The identity
Or
part.
should I ask you, or do you share it anyway?
No, I haven't planned to share it this time. I wanted to mix things up a little.
Oh, sorry.
But yeah, if you want me to share something specifically, we can take the time.
The last time you shared is about you were scared in selling your products, or it is, and then as well your identity found out that. Please, can you explain this?
No, it's basically what we've been discussing right now, right? It's so now I'm responsible for 20 people, I said, so I have more of a people-oriented, leadership-oriented role. But before that, I took 2 years to be more of a sales-oriented person. So I had to learn how to sell things. And that's exactly actually the thing that I learned there. It's if you do project work, that's what I did before most of the time. You work on a project, you get tasks, you complete tasks in time or ahead of time, you get reward. That's the system that's a business system. And I'm gonna tell you, it's not that much different in the church environment, to be honest, right? You get a task, do this ministry, do this Sunday school, whatever. And if you do it very good and you create momentum around yourself, everybody's gonna applaud. But in sales, you only have, most of the time, you only have maybe half an hour to 1 hour to convince somebody that you are the right person to work with. So you cannot rely on working. You can have all of your boxes ticked before a sales meeting, and then spend half an hour with a customer and be out. So the thing I learned in that as well, it's exactly the same point. It's more about sales and selling things. It becomes it became such an important school in my life, because I had to learn that it doesn't matter what I do, but it matters much more who I am. So if I only do all the right things, I'm not going to sell a thing. People are going to buy from me because of what they see in me and because they trust me that I will deliver the thing that I say that I deliver. But at this point, the requests that we get from our customers are most of the time so complex, there's no way for me to say if we can actually do what they ask me in half an hour with the information they give me. And it's in that moment where you have to understand it's more important who you are, and what we are is children of God. And when you're a child of God, what problem could come against you that you cannot resolve? So it's exactly the same point. It's just so important, that aspect of who we are as children of God. It's so important in business life from my perspective. It's where everything comes from. And we lack in. I would make the suggestion that as a Christian community, we lack that way too much. The world is showing us how to do it in a very ungodly way. And if we're not stepping up, people are going to look at social media stars and want to be like that. How about they would look up to Christians and want to be like that? And that it's not even not impossible. It's very likely that it will happen when we just represent Jesus in a good way wherever we are.
Yeah, very good. Thank you.
Yes. Do you have more questions or other? Please, let's make this a discussion, or also go against what I say. It's in the discussions and in not agreeing that you find many times the important truth behind things.
I have a question about we as a leader, we not only manage our time in the business context, also we have family, with so many things going on. So you as a leader, how do you set your priorities in managing your time?
Yeah, that's a good question. And again, I would say it has everything to do with self-management, basically. So if I just spend the time for whoever is the loudest, my wife is taking a lot of care of the kids, so I could spend 80 hours a day here, no problem. There's always a problem to solve or something to do. So it's about, in the beginning of my year, making a plan and saying, okay, these are the priority pillars and they need to have a certain time, and then I need to have rules for myself on how I manage that. So, and this is a constant learning. It's always a battle in managing that time. When it comes to, I would say it comes to self-management. For me, so priority number one has to be my faith in God. Otherwise, I would not do a single day of work here. Number two is my family. It has to be much more important than the business. Everything else just doesn't make any sense. I never met somebody that was happy if they did a different order. And then number 3 is business. But I spend obviously much more time in business than, well, I spend more time with my family, but most of the time then we sleep, so that doesn't really count. But yeah, I would, so, and then one of the things I try to do is, for example, if my family needs me, then they're going to be priority. And I'm gonna cancel meetings and do stuff so they know, my kids should know that when they need me, I'm gonna be there for them. So, yeah, and then I try to do, with my kids especially, I try to generate experience for them, because I don't get to spend as much time. I try to make this time, that this is one thing I learned also. I also learning, it's only been 3 years, but I try to take time and generate experience for them. But I'm young in that game, I have to be honest. I mean, most of you probably have more experience in doing that, so I can learn much more from you than you can learn from me. But I want to become, I want to learn.
About the planning, knowing what I do in November, isn't it for us as Christians often this issue that we feel like, oh, I don't want to plan because maybe then I interrupt God's plan? I mean, this is what I hear all the time, and now I'm a bit like, oh, this makes me a bit upset.
Yeah, but and again, so this was an exaggeration. Obviously, I'm not. I really don't want to make the point. All go out of here and make your plans so you know what you have to do in November. It was just for me reflecting on. Okay, this is what the top leader is doing, and I need to compare myself more to this than to somebody who has never something to do the entire day, which is what I would more tend to do, obviously. And I just I do get that point, obviously, that we have to be available for God, right? And that if you're running from, if all of your minutes are planned, then probably you don't have time for, spontaneous conversation with somebody. And I'm not saying we have to go in that direction, but on the other hand, I would also say that many times people miss out on the things that they should actually do and tackle because they always want to be available. And especially with young, I was the same. I was like, I didn't want to commit to iSolutions for a very long time, to stay here for a long term, because I always wanted to be free. If some days God calls me to go to mission to Africa or whatever place in the world, then I wanted to be free to do that. But at some point, I think it's about also growing up as a Christian, is to at some point become more firm in what it is that God is calling you to, and becoming more devoted to that, and also saying, okay, I'm going to plan ahead and try to do my things. I know there's also the verse in the Bible that tells me, okay, you're making your plans, you're saying tomorrow you're going to that city and then you're going to spend your time there, be happy. Of course, I want to be open if things change. I'm trying to make myself not dependent on what I'm doing. But this doesn't mean I want to walk around without having plans. That is, to me, is dangerous.
I agree, and I think when we don't plan as well and it's free, also other things will take it rather than God,
Yeah.
So, and planning is the first step, and being aware that God can still interrupt my plans. That's more my conviction.
Another example I would give is if I feel like, for example, if you are unprepared in situation, then you would always think about, oh, I'm unprepared, and then you would feel uncertain, and then you're not in a strong position to adapt to something that God is doing. However, if you're prepared, then you know exactly what you want to do, and you have the headspace to even think about what could I possibly do differently. So I would say it's exactly the other way around. Life will come and fill your task. I mean, when you're a student, maybe you still have the luxury. But tell me just one person who thinks it's very easy to take off half a day, even only just half a day a week, to spend time with God. I don't know any person who says that's easy. Nobody does. This tells me life's just it takes you up. It's about this image, probably you've heard of it, of the if you have a glass and then you put in if you want to put in small stones and big stones, and if you first put in the small stones, then you cannot fit the big stones. But if you first fit in the big stones, then you can fit it all in. And that's just, if you say, oh, I'm going to keep myself open, then I think for most of the people, what will happen is it will just be get poured with the small stones. And then if God is asking you to add the big one, you said, oh, I don't have capacity.
No, just about planning. I think it's because he started with leadership and self-management, and then being efficient and influential, and that really require a planning. I would not separate God's plan and not have plan, because he also said that I matter, and that's why what I do that matter, and how I handle my time that matters. So, and there is always place for God, but I want to at least know what I'm doing next weekend or something. It
I
is so
think
interesting.
as well that in planning you always can change your plan. It should be somehow planning that you're also able to change it. So when you are no more able to change, when change is needed, then it's a danger. But so you need to somehow, or I say planning, when you plan 3 to 4, I have a meeting, and 4 to 5 is a meeting, then probably something is wrong, or because you have to plan such that you say, okay, that's a meeting, and have half an hour between before the next, and planning in this way, or where flexibility is also in it. So I think planning everything like this can also be a danger.
Of course. And I don't want to make the point I'm making is not go home and do your plan. Be aware that your time is so important that it deserves management. And for some people this means, I know what spare time I have in November, but for others it's never going to meet. It means that I have 2 days a week to spend with God, worshiping. That's all. All of this is okay. Yeah. We're running out of time. I'm afraid.
I don't know if you want to quickly say something about finances that Marcus was.
I can.
I would really like to hear that.
Okay. Sure.
We did not leave you.
This is more difficult to me, to be honest, talking about finance. But I really feel like God is urging me to step into that and start talking and sharing my thoughts about it. Also because we're learning so much about financing in the school that I'm going to. And I really came to the conclusion that, and this is not earth-breaking or new to you, because you probably all have read it in the Bible at some point, but I'm very sure that there is a earthly way of thinking about finance, and then there's a God way of thinking about finance. And what I see happening in Swiss society is that we are more influenced by the earthly way of how finances are handled than that we are influenced by the biblical way. And this really, I think, is stupid. Because especially in Switzerland, I told you that we are, even if you are poor in Switzerland, you are still in the top 2% of the most wealthy people in Switzerland, or in the world. And we have to become role models in how we handle that. And what I want to talk about, or just briefly, we don't have too much time now, but I really want to maybe establish 1 or 2 thoughts and give you that as a thought process on how we can think about finance in a biblical way. And so the first point I want to make is, I'm just going to give you 1 point that is very basic, and then an image that I had that I want to share. So the first point is, in the earthly system, what I learned in Haske is you have to optimize the win for you. You have to optimize what's in it for you. So it's always going to be about taking. So we learn, actually, we learn strategy on how I can take away from the revenue of my customer and add it to my revenue. That's what you learn, because that's how money works when we're talking about the spirit of money, mammon. This is how it works. It's all about myself. It's all about getting more for myself. But God has a very different way of thinking about this. God says, give and you will receive more. And I'm afraid that we as Christians are not getting this, and we are hiding ourselves behind we all have to be poor, and we should have no money at all, and then we're not going to be in the temptation of taking too much for ourselves. But we should not be afraid. That's my personal opinion, or that's the thing I'm really concerned with. We should not be afraid of God entrusting us large amount of money. He has all the money in the world, but he's going to test us with the really small steps if we are willing to give and give more than we can actually we have to give to the point where it really hurts. We have to learn that as a Christian community. I'm so convinced of that. In Switzerland, we learn to put money aside and to make sure you have money for your pension and for the house you want to get in the future and everything. And these are good values, don't get me wrong, but they come from a system where it's about taking for yourself. And I want to make that point. If we give, then we will open up the hands for God to give us more. And we have to become much better in giving, much better. We have to learn to go to the point where we don't have money, but we trust in God that He will provide, even if we're making a salary that is pretty big, right? When we built our office in Zurich, it looks like this, but maybe 2 times as beautiful. It's more beautiful. It's more special. It has the view on the runway. So it's a very special office. When we wanted to build that office, so we rent it. You rent it on a 10 years contract, and then you have to build all the furniture, all the toilets, everything. You have to do it yourself. It costed, I think, around 2 million, roughly, 2 million. When we signed the renting contract, the company was going very well, and then we started to have some problems financially. And then we had to move into the office and start the construction building, but we didn't have any money. We needed 2 million, but we had nothing. It was a difficult time, really difficult, even to pay our bills as a company. And then God provided 2 million.
Wow.
But not by sending 2 million to a bank account so you could see, everything is fine, we can lean back now, we can build. We just started building. And over time, we were able to pay every single bill on time for the office refurbishment. And I'd like us to take this much more as a picture on how we need to operate. And I'm telling you the story because what works for us on a small scale also works on a big scale. But we have to train in the small scale. We have to be willing to give away to the point where it really hurts. And it's not for the benefit of it. I hear all the time, we had again in the church, the pastor was saying we're low on the budget and now everybody needs to chip in. That is earthly thinking. The pastor needs to talk about you have an opportunity now to give so you can receive more. I had this image, and then I'm going to close because I don't want you to miss your trains, but I had this image of God. God has all the finances in the world. Everything belongs to God. All the finances belong to God. If I hear Christians tell me, I would love to do that, but I just lack the money, I can't stand that. You are working, you are the son of the king, has all the money in the world. But God showed me at some point, or that's an image I got from God, that the finances of God are like hydro, these hydro energy stations that we have in Swiss mountains, where you have a huge dam, you have tons of water behind, and then you spend it through, it goes through a pipe, and then it generates electricity. And many times we are just seeing the small river that is pouring out at the end, and we are only willing to take risks financially if we see the big amount of water that's behind the wall. But God tells us He is going to add as much water as is needed to the turbine, as much electricity that you consume. He will provide if you are following my standards. And I would suggest we spend too much time trying to follow standards, blah, 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 doing everything we can, instead of really taking the risk and going out and letting God open the floodgates and the turbine be hit hard. Money is never an issue for God. never.
Amen. It's so cool.
So that's let's not make it longer. Thank you so much for coming here. It's a real honor having you.
Yeah.
No, thank you very much.